Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for joining our session, The Art of Fiscal Responsibility, Best Practice Spend Control. I can see there's a couple of people I've worked with in the past from Wheel, so good to see some old and new faces. And let's really start to get stuck in. Before we get stuck in though, what I would like to do is give a very large thank you to our sponsors. You know, without any of these sponsors, we can't get the great information and the expert panelists we have, on the panel today. So thank you to our sponsors for making this all possibility. A bit of housekeeping before we get started. Always best to snooze notifications. If you're an NBA fan, I know that there's a big Game 7 on today. If you got people, pestering you to get something expenses released, let's put them on pause for now. Let's focus on here. It's going to be roughly about 45 minutes, and the session is going to be recorded and shared. So please feel free to ask any questions. I just ask that you do it through the Q&A function. That allows us to make sure that we can actually prioritize and ask the questions to our panelists. We have some great speakers today. People I've had the pleasure to work with in the past. I really value their contributions. We've got Tyler, who's a partner at the Bean Counters, Jason, a financial controller at Camplify, and Chloe from Wheel, who's another financial controller. I'll be hosting today. I'm part of our customer success team at Wheel. And if you haven't met me before, get in contact. I always like to talk to people that are using Wheel. All righty. Before we kick things off, and I'm going to let as I said, let the expert speak. Let's talk about some of the questions. So really, how effective is your current expense policy at keeping everyone accountable for spending? This is a huge one that I talk about with customers, and I think it breaks down to a lot of things about rights and responsibilities to cards. And I think it starts with spend policy. The way that I think about Wheel is Wheel's just an instrument that enables and enacts spend policy. So I think that it's really crucial to have that at the start. So how effective is a current expense policy at keeping everyone accountable? We'll give a couple of seconds for everyone to answer here. Awesome. Do you think we're pretty accountable at Wheel, Chloe?
I think so. I would say so.
I think so. When Chloe asks if I got outstanding expense reports, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of how soon I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
I'm going to record that.
I did some chasing this morning of one of my team members as well. It's part of the job sometimes.
Part of it. Alrighty. Well, let's get stuck in. Let's stop hearing me. I come from Western Sydney. People are probably sick of my accent already. Look, let's have an icebreaker. I'd love to everyone on our panel to introduce themselves, share probably what's the most outlandish out of policy spending you've ever seen. Keep everything anonymous. Tyler, let's start with yourself. What's something outlandish that you've seen come through?
Yeah, hi everyone. Good to be involved. Tyler from the Bean Counters. We are a 6-people business here in Sydney that help organizations in Australia and now the world install new technology, predominantly around finance, expenses, and payroll and HR. I've got a lot of good expense stories from my time. I was a financial controller or a CFO for 12, 13 years. I've seen everything from fishing licenses to partners, business class flights to Italy to go to a conference. But I think the best one I saw was a senior associate at a law firm was on a conference in Sydney he's in the Perth office, and he put a massage through the company cards from the hotel because he had a sore back, but he pushed on through to make sure he could finish the conference. And I knocked that one back pretty quick.
What a trooper. What a trooper. Chloe, what's something outlandish, and a bit about yourself, obviously, but outlandish, and hopefully it's nothing from Will.
So hi everyone, I'm Chloe. As Jesse mentioned, I'm the financial controller at Will. So I guess I have a very vested interest in today's topic because not only is it a key finance function, but it's also the core thing that Will is trying to help companies solve. An example, outlandish. Okay, so top of mind example is not at Will, previous roles. There was someone who put through taxis every Saturday night for consecutive weeks at 2 a.m. on a Saturday from King's Cross home, ongoing. And when it got picked up, we were just like, what is this? So yeah, that's the one that always sticks to my mind.
Yeah. It's tough ask to say that that's on the company 2 a.m. Jason, I'll throw it over to you.
Thanks, Jesse. Jason Dunlop here. I'm the financial controller at Camplify. Camplify is a peer-to-peer RV and caravan sharing platform. We operate in 7 countries. So happy to be here. Look, in my experience, I've seen a lot of funny spends on corporate credit cards, from excessive lunches, boozy afternoons. Even things like our sales reps took their clients out to not at Camplify, to a dinner, and they let the client order the wines all night, and it was a rather expensive meal at the end of the night, and there wasn't a lot of food eaten. But one of the most outlandish, out of policy expenses I've seen is we had a CEO once who was at a conference in Southeast Asia and was on an international roaming policy, and he decided to update his iPhone iOS on the international roaming policy. So that was a very expensive exercise for him. So it's not just always credit cards that can come up and bite you with out of policy spending.
Yeah. Well, thanks everyone for sharing that. I'm sure everyone on the call has seen something similar. But let's get started off into thinking about building collective accountability and definitions of fiscal responsibility. Tyler, how do you define fiscal responsibility, and why is it important?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a key part of the accountant role, general manager role, also the CEO role, I find. And it's something you have to learn really, really quick. A lot of us start in practice, in chartered accounting firms, and you don't really get that much exposure to it. You only, once you kind of go into industry and then people start putting through very interesting expenses and you've got to uphold the spend policy, you start getting an understanding. So for me, I think about paying, it's all about money going out the door. So it's about paying, the right amount to the right person or the right business at the right time. And, those things need to be balanced. You need to balance timing. So supplier timing versus cash flow in the business timing. And one of our jobs is to manage that communication process if something's going to be late. It's also about having the interests balanced between, I think, of the 3 parties, like the staff, the supplier, and the business. So I've worked in businesses where, the previous financial controllers or previous CFOs had barbed wire in their pockets. And, they were way too much in the interest of the business, and it impacted the supplier relationships. So for me, it's about understanding the balance. It's about not sweating the small stuff, and then trying to have all parties' interests in balance. And it's an ongoing thing. And I got better and better at it the more and more I got pushed.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all a gradual process, and I think with everything that's happening with the tools like Wheel, it helps enable it. Chloe, Jason, anything that you think about when it comes to fiscal responsibility and why it's important?
Yeah, I think I really concur with what Tyler said. It's really thinking about it in a well-rounded way. It's not just saving money for the company. It's actually, you got to think of the staff, the suppliers. And if you don't think about that, then it's gonna make the management of it such a harder task for everyone.
Yeah, agreed. I I mean, I mentioned it, to you guys previously, but like I installed a 3-month timesheet billing system and all these beautiful things that I was working around the clock to do. But the ones that the staff in this architecture business thanked me the most for was putting in good expense policies because it saved them time, So in that balance, like you've really got to weigh up the time cost, and I've even walked into businesses where people used to make it hard for staff to get their reimbursements back so they wouldn't do it. And I think that's just bad accounting. That's like just being completely unbalanced into the business versus the staff. Like the staff are the business. Without them, there's nothing.
Yeah. And if you make it hard for them, they're less likely to do it.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
it's this vicious cycle.
And then they're going to leave because people will get jaded about a $50 taxi. If you've really got to understand what can disengage a staff member.
Important. Good employees are hard to find.
Yeah, true.
I do have a question for you. As a financial controller, where's the first place you see businesses tend to come unstuck in encouraging shared financial responsibility?
Yeah, look, I think the hardest part about shared fiscal responsibility is really getting all the employees engaged. And the first thing we need is really like a clear and robust expense policy. Like Tyler said, if they're sweating about, can I put a $50 taxi through, because they don't know if they can or cannot do it, then it's just going to make the whole process so much harder to, I guess, implement and also just monitor. So I guess, and if it's too complicated, people are going to treat it like a TNC, everyone does it. I've opened it. Have I read it? Maybe not. So you want people to actually read it to know what they can and cannot do, right? And I think the thing about expense policies is that there's really no one size fits all, because depending on the industry and the company, something that's okay for one company may not be for another.
Yeah.
But I think we do have a will template which I think is a pretty good baseline that you can kind of adjust and suit to your needs. And if anyone's interested, we're more than happy to share. So just put a comment in the comment section.
How many pages long is it, Chloe?
Not too long. If you get a copy, you'll find out.
I used to work at, and Deloitte won't mind me sharing this, they had the most extensive expense policy I've ever seen. It was a 90-page PDF. And it was the worst, hardest to read, hardest to understand policy I've ever seen. And it should have just been bullet points. Here's what you can do, here's what you can't do, and flow charts. Yes. Flow charts are the master. You're already getting requests for a copy of the expense policy. Yeah, don't send Deloitte. Don't look at it. It's public knowledge.
Jason, what are your thoughts on the expense policy?
Look, I've always been in sort of businesses that are scaling up. So unfortunately, a lot of the time, the expense policies come after the overspend or the incorrect spending has occurred. So historically, I've always been sort of chasing and getting policies through. I think the easiest thing, as Tyler said, it's got to be simple. It's got to be easy to understand. The employees have to know what's right, what's wrong, and basically it's as you're trying to bring these things in, it's an engagement. As Chloe said, it's an engagement piece. Where the policy is there to protect the employee just as much as it is to protect the company, and basically sets the rules up for what the employee can do or can spend.
Well, that's an interesting point as well, because working with scaling up businesses, it does have a very different way that you sort of introduce it. I can imagine bringing a new policy or even revising an existing policy could be met with some resistance if staff, they've been used to spending in a certain way. So Jason, has this ever been, in your experience, the case? And how do you shift the mindset?
Yeah, so nobody likes having something taken away from them. So if you're bringing a policy in that the employee feels that something that they previously could spend money on has been taken away from them, then realistically, you're going to get pushback, and you're going to have people who will acknowledge the policy but not adhere to it. So one, it's creating that company culture that this is right for the business and that sort of stuff. But mainly the way I find it has been successful in the past is to bring the employees along on the journey. So, engage some of the people that have had budgets cut or have had expense ability to spend money in certain areas reduced. Bring them on the journey of why this is happening, more so than finance or HR coming down and going, this is the policy and you must adhere to it. It really is a sort of a combined path to sort it out. Yeah,
you're right about culture. Businesses have expense management culture, and you need to, as a accountant, financial controller, CFO, even as like an accounts payable clerk, you need to understand the culture. You need to understand what goes through and what doesn't. And, Jason, sometimes I let things slide. If someone puts through like a $50 personal expense and I know it's just not worth the fight, I just drop it into like a non-deductible item, tell the CEO, because, those things kind of happen. But, like if it's a material amount, sometimes you actually have to have those really hard conversations. So it's about learning how to have hard conversations in peaceful ways. And Jason, just as you said, it's about, hey, look, your budget's getting cut. Here's why. And, this is what, best for we think you and the business. And then listening to their answer. And like, if they've got, hey, that's wrong. If we cut our marketing budget by this much, we're going to lose, this much work. So really being a two-sided financial controller or a CEO or a CFO and coming into those conversations without a fixed answer. So, if you're talking to someone, we're cutting you from 10 grand down to 8 grand, what does that mean for you? And if they say we need to be 12, not 10, then your job is to facilitate that discussion with the CEO or the board or whatever the answer is there. Have you been in that, Jason? Have you had to go back and forth on those chats?
Yeah, we obviously a company's resources are finite. Like no company really has infinite resources, so it is always a balancing act between different departments, board objectives, senior management objectives. So you're constantly juggling as a financial controller. You're constantly juggling the needs and wants of the business. So it's
hard.
It's one of those. It can get hard. We've got a really good culture. Circling back to your people putting personal expenses on cards, we've got a pretty good culture here at Camplify where most of the time, the first we know that someone's put a personal expense on a card is they've sent us a Slack message to say, hey guys, I've accidentally put this on the corporate card. I've sent the money back already. So, but that's because we've got that open and honest policy and that two-way that communication between finance and the users of these corporate cards and real cards and that sort of stuff.
It's about speed of that conversation. We were talking just before it went live. Is that culture? We couldn't do it 10 years ago because Chloe, you were saying like we used to get statements that were 30 days old with 15 days to pay, and then we were querying people for expenses in early April that we're getting visibility on the 30th of May. And what I'm seeing now is especially with products like Xero, QuickBooks, and MyOb with bank feeds, we're seeing all the data come out immediately the next day. Like my teams, we have to have all our reconciliations done by 10 a.m. because they know I'm checking if they're not done. And so, we're on top of these expenses really quickly. And that's when I think the culture can be developed because we're not nagging. We're like enabling people to have conversations that are a day old or 2 days old, that they don't have to go through archives to find. So what I'm finding is we're respecting people's time as well as making us more efficient as well, which I really like.
Great. And I think it's just like you said, just switching that mindset, you have your timely information straight up now versus before. But also like what you were saying before, it's kind of like when you do have those difficult conversations, whether it is like a personal expense accident that got put on or you have to cut budget, it's like, because we're not our everyday interactions, it's not so much like, what is this, from 2 months ago? Give me XYZ. It's not that, like, it's always just a bit of a friction kind of in the relationship. And because that's been taken away with all the tools that we have available now, when we do need to have those difficult conversations, it's like they're not coming in thinking, oh no, it's Chloe, she's going to be like, no, every time. It's kind of like we're open to the conversation. And like you said, if we're like, we have to cut X, and they're like, oh, actually, we need it because X, Y, Z, then I always try to position it in a way that I'm also trying to help you. We're all here for one thing, and that's to do the best job that we can, and obviously drive the business goals. So if you're telling me you actually need this, and it's going to, tick so many goals for the business, that I'm more than happy to take that away and bring it up to the execs and help you get that.
Yeah. That's part of the role, is like going, hey, this is actually a good spend. It might be a $500 meal for 2 people, but it might be worth us getting business out of it. Like that sometimes is the answer. Sometimes you just cop that FBT.
I love it. I love it, guys. We've got a lot of questions, so I'm going to move us on. I'm going to give us a nice segue, because one of the things that I see with customers is that Wheel's a really nice catalyst for change, for you to reset your policy and sort of say, here are the ground rules that we're working with. It is that catalyst of change. So we're going to start to talk about software and systems for spend control. And Tyler, outside of a robust expense policy, what strategies are you implementing? You're advising people daily, what recommendations do you have to ensure that day-to-day operations are kept in place?
Yeah, it's good call. We go for simple, number one. Like our business logo is making business simple. And it's because we find when there's too much complexity in business, accountants spend too much time, and it costs operational and client-facing people too much time. So our number one goal with any system is, how fast is the learning trajectory? So we like the systems we install, their goal is for them to be iPhone levels, where people, like, gave my mum an iPhone and didn't have to train her, maybe 1 or 2 painful phone calls, but that's okay. So I look at simple, fast. The other one I really like is contracts. So I really like month-to-month contracts. It makes the adoption so much faster. I was working with a client the other day, and it was, with Fathom, which is one of the, sponsors of this. And, they were on a trial, and they're like, look, we're just going to try it for a couple months, spend the money, and then see how it goes through. And I think that ability to like not have to lock in for 3 years now or a whole year really enables that transition. So I'm looking at simple, good contracts. And then the other one, if I'm looking at on a system side, I'm looking for things that make the integration easy. And, that's honestly, it's why I like Wheel. Like the biggest change for me on Wheel is not having to chase people for documents, because the system does it for them. And I'm actually looking at a comment on the chat from one of my favorite people in Victoria named Beth McIlwain. And she's saying she went from spending 25 grand a month on card swapping down to 12 grand a month because of reduced data entry and receipt chasing, and those types of things, because it's simple, it's easy, and like the system does it for them. Like there's real evidence of why letting automation do your job makes you a better accountant, general manager, head of operations, even down to accounts payable clerk. For me, those are our kind of key functions. And Beth, yeah, thanks. All the staff and all ages love it. So that's one of the things I like about Wheel. Easy to train, easy to use. It pushes you through the process.
100%. And I guess that efficiency is something that organizations should embrace as a whole, outside of every division. But Chloe and Jason, I might throw it over to Jason. What's your thoughts just quickly on day-to-day ensuring fiscal responsibility is kept?
I'm pretty much just going to sort of echo what Tyler said. The ability for Will to chase obviously the receipt management and all that sort of stuff, it means my accounts payable clerk isn't emailing out or Slack messaging people at the end of the month that all the recs are there, they're done. We're also then, as we're processing, we're getting real-time data into the P&L, so we're constantly reviewing to budget during the month. So we have a lot more agility in our business making decisions on if a department's under spending for the month, it's a quick message to the exec to say, hey, you're under here this month. Do you have to up your Google or Facebook or whatever? So not only are we trying to cut costs, we're also being able to advise our executive team when they're actually not spending up to the budgeted spends that they wanted to spend. So, and then it's a matter of, are we accruing and all that sort of stuff. But that's basically, it gives us a lot more real-time data to help drive the business.
Accurate, timely financial data is the lifeblood of any business.
Yeah, and I like the review function in there as well. Like, I love the first thing we do whenever we connect to Xero or QuickBooks and Wheel account, you connect them across, set up the chart of accounts, and then immediately we're setting up like finance team review as well. So, we can just make sure that the descriptions are in there, they're coded to the right spot. So, I really think the approval process is such a key function, and it needs to be easy. Like I've worked in businesses that use Concur and a whole bunch of very difficult systems. Like I like Xero expenses, but it just hasn't got the approval function that say Wheel does. So being able to quickly set up, like we did some this morning, actually I did it last night for a client, and it took me the best part of 5 minutes to set up his finance team with every review that they needed for bills, expense reimbursements, budget approvals, and card spends. That one I think is the absolute winner. Like how quickly as a finance team you can review something, say, yes, that's cool, amend it. You don't have to go back to the employee, amend it, just send it on through, make sure the invoice is real, make sure it's not a bad picture, those types of things.
And strategies is one thing, but I know that we have a very attentive culture to financial discipline. So Chloe, I might direct this one to you. What can finance teams, how can they bring employees along for the journey of collective accountability when it comes to spending?
Yeah, so I think, like we've said, it's really, the tools really do help because, like we said, it saves us a lot of time. It takes away the friction. So we can actually spend the time to influence and take the employees along the journey with us. So I guess at Will, we do it in two ways. First one, we partner cross-functionally with all the leaders. So we align their goals and we approve the spend at the budget level. Then really, once that's done, we hand it over to the platform, and then the leaders will, own their own budget. So we're taking them along the journey. And then on the other end, at the employee level, we make sure that everyone also has access to a way to purchase within a policy, of course, and it makes it really easy for them so that it's a bit of a two-way street. You go top down and bottom up, and then that way, hopefully everyone's happy, and then the finance team is happy.
Absolutely. I think I know that from experience, that, as I said before, it's not a matter of if, but how soon. Tyler and Jason, what do you both do? And we might start with Tyler and Jason. We'll answer after, but what do you do to create that culture of financial discipline apart from tools or strategies? How do you get that collective accountability and buy-in?
Yeah, I talk a lot from the moment I walk into a business. A lot of people do these, your first 60 days or 90 days as a CFO is the most important, and that's just rubbish. It is important, but it's more important what you do on a regular, consistent basis from the moment you walk in. So if you are an accountant with barbed wire in your pockets, you're going to be like that for the next 4 years. You can tell. So, you know, I really try to understand what spending the business needs. I just try to understand the metrics. So if we're a $50 million business, are we spending $20 million on operating expenses, you know? And I try to make sure I understand the high levels first. And then I communicate like crazy. You know, if we're using Teams, or back in the day, it used to be Chatter and all those types of functions, I'm always communicating about what is okay. And I'm doing it on a regular basis. You know, Chloe, you mentioned like an expense policy. You know, I used to have a 3-page expense policy for an 80 people recruitment business. And about every quarter, I would just repost that. And if someone went outside it, or someone was new, they would also get that back to them in an email. Just, hey, welcome on board. Please find a copy of the expense policy. Also, if you're not sure, come talk to me. So really good communication, good understanding. And then the faster I can let the staff know that I'm not there to roadblock the business, I'm there to enable the business. So Jason, I know you were talking before about like those difficult conversations and how you have them. So, you know, the first one of those, I don't book meeting rooms. I don't make it formal. I just come up, hey, you know, what was this? You know, what was this expense for? Is it all right? And then try to judge their body language. So I have really informal, peaceful conversations. If I can't do that in person, I'll do it on the phone or over Teams or whatever communication we have. So I try to hit that from day one, and then I reinforce it as often as I can on transactions. And then I'm continually sharing every quarter at least my expense policy, and with all my new starters as well.
It's interesting. So like part of that is communication, but it's education as well. So to the whole panel, what role does financial education and training play in sort of getting that collective accountability and communication? Where does that sit for everyone here?
Yeah, it's a good one. You know, for me, it's about creating simple rules that people know, and then not sweating the small stuff. Number 2. So when, like, if someone does something for $20, I just don't care. I'm not wasting my wage, their wage, any relationship over $20. I do not care. I'll put $20 into the business myself, so I don't have to look at that entry. That one I think is one of the key. And then, you know, really thinking about understanding the expenditure, the people who are making the expenditure, being in their shoes, you know, trying to make it easy for them, trying to make it clear that, hey, if you do spend this money, you're going to get reimbursed, and you're going to get reimbursed in full, or you're going to know exactly how much you're going to get paid back. So if you're traveling and you've got $110 per day per diem AUD, you spend $150, hey, I'm going to give you $110 no matter what. That type of play is really important for me.
And
what about you guys, Chloe?
Yeah, just having that like open line of communication, because I guess it's obviously very important to have a simple, easy expense policy that people know what to do, but also not being afraid to come and ask us if there's something that's a bit ambiguous and they're not sure about. I think that's entire of that education process, because I feel, and Jesse, you can tell me otherwise, at least at Will, I think we have a very open line of communication. Everyone's like quite happy to come and have a chat if they're not sure of something. And I really appreciate that, because I'd really rather have that chat up front so that we don't have any issues later. And also, because I have that information, it just makes it so much easier for when I look at cash flow forecasting. And it's just overall, I think communication is really key.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that one, Chloe. Communication is key. One of the key features of Will that I like, because we're a little bit different, we have a lot of cards issued to staff through Will. So there's not a lot of expense reimbursements here at Camplify, but a lot of the staff run on incredibly low budgets, and the request function through the Wheel app, you know, if they need additional funds, you know, hirers get stuck, people get stuck, people traveling for work get stuck. So, to be able to open the app, put a request through, I get the notification on my phone, hit approve, the funds are available for the staff member to use pretty well instantly. That's just a great feature. And they can, in that spiel, they can put what exactly they're spending the money for, and if it's in budget or out of budget. So that way people don't have to worry about potentially spending their own money and needing a reimbursement. It's there, it's in black and white. I've got the approval ability on my phone. So it's a great function, and it just keeps that communication going.
The speed of that is like nothing I've ever had before. Like, because we use Wheel in our business, but we obviously install it for our clients as well. And like, my team, like they've got, $500 budgets, right? But every now and then they might travel for work, so they're going to need a little bit more. And the fact that they can just jump in and do a really quick budget approval or budget request, I just haven't seen it. I haven't seen it be that simple for both sides. And I think that's just such a winner. And Jason, it's interesting there. Why don't you use more expense reimbursements? Because we've got we work with an organization that does a lot of camps. The camp leader gets like a card, and then everyone else that spends does the expense reimbursements, because we wanted, I suppose, less cards. What's your logic for more cards? What's the play there?
I'm not sure what the play. It's just how we've sort of was inherited when I started here. But I suppose it just comes down to just the speed in the transaction. That the staff members don't need to worry about having their own money on the line or anything like that. So it just sort of reinforces that the company, will pay for you to do your role and do it well.
It can bug people, like having to spend their own money. Like I remember, when I was a young accountant on like 60 grand a year, spending flights to travel. I was working in Melbourne, traveling up to Sydney. Like I had the money, but I just didn't have the 3 weeks, always spare to have thousands of dollars on the line. That is quite an important tool. And I think that speed of expense reimbursement one's amazing. Like I saw Beth in the chat mention it as well. Like the fact that I don't have to actually pay an expense reimbursement is just awesome, because it makes my accounts payable process normal. Like, I remember I was working at the design business and we were using zero expenses. It went well, for expense reimbursements. But in our AP batch, we were batching 300-400 line items for staff members for their reimbursements, and not having to do that process. It's better for the staff because they get paid instantly through Wheel, which I like. And I also like my finance team. They're really managing bills. They're not managing the little tiny transactions that are just really shouldn't be in supplier bills. So that function, I think it really values finance times, but the speed of that is just awesome.
Tyler, how have you seen the software solutions work with Wheel? How's it potentially enhanced fiscal responsibility?
Good question. I think the visibility is the key. It helps a CFO or a financial controller do the job they're supposed to do, which is review the high-level transactions rather than look at making sure the basics are paid. So as a CFO, my job was to do nothing. Like I literally had within 18 months, if I hadn't automated my role and had zero tasks on a daily, monthly basis, and I'm talking month-end reports, all that stuff. The only thing you should really be touching as a CFO is a budget, in my opinion. So that by not having to manage these little transactions means I can start reviewing the transactions for appropriateness, and I'm looking at my entertainment and I'm like quizzing my, if I've got an account director or a salesperson, I'm like, hey, is this $1,000 meal, was this worth it? So I'm having conversations at the high end rather than making sure that the basics are covered. So I think that's a really important play, is the more we can automate the basics, through artificial intelligence, through, good automation, through good system integration, that enables us to be better, more high valued, high functioning, finance leaders.
There's automation. I think, Jason, Camplify is a really outside the box and creative business. So I think there's also there's the automation, there's the process side, but what do you do that might be creative, or how do you encourage innovation and growth while maintaining that fiscal responsibility on the other side?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. No staff member is going to come to you with an idea that's going to make things worse. So I think the worst thing you can do as a financial controller or finance manager is basically knock an idea on the head without giving it any airtime. People will just get stymied and not keep coming back with ideas, and basically growth suffers. So our company culture is outcomes based. So yes, you've got this great idea. What are the outcomes that it's going to basically provide for us, and how can we measure that? So I'm constantly making myself and my team available to help people with these ideas at our company, build business cases, build budgets around it. Be able to show their executive what the payback period is, what it's going to generate in additional revenue and that sort of stuff. And I think the key part is business partnering with all employees that have an idea of improving a part of their role and their process that is struggling.
Yeah, good. I'm stealing that, man. Being an outcome-based finance team. I'm going to quote that about 50 times.
Chloe, I've got a question for you. Can you share any success stories or achievements relating to Organisation Wheel? Could be another one about the commitment to fiscal responsibility.
Yeah, look, I think overall, I really echo like what we've been saying today, communication, business partnering. One of the, I guess, if I had to choose one example, is when I think about it in a company, like marketing spend is one that could fluctuate from month to month, depending, on an event that happens or something comes up that, often you kind of get not blindsided, but you don't know until afterwards. And I think at Will, I think this is a success story in that the platform really helps me see everything that's going on. I see the requests, and also because we have that open line of communication, I always know what's going to be spent beforehand. And that just takes away that, when you come to month end, you do your reporting and someone asks me, why is that spend higher? I have an answer like that. I already know. It's not like, let me have a look at that, dig through trolls and trolls of expenses, then go back and talk. And it just takes time. So I think overall, that is where I guess a success story I can think of.
Well, look, I really appreciate each one of our expert panelists' time today. I do have another poll question. Whether or not it's naturally come up, I know that, Jason, Tyler, you're big advocates for Wheels. So it was great to have a conversation about how you see it play its part. Because we have had that conversation, is it something that people would like to know more about? Feel free to answer in the poll. But Jason, Tyler, Chloe, really appreciate the opportunity to get your thoughts on fiscal responsibility. I mean, I'm talking to customers all the time about what you're talking about there. I think there's a lot of things that I can pick out and say, hey, I might even share this recording. So thank you for your time. Awesome. So that'll wrap up the session for today. Thanks everyone for joining. Again, thank you to our panelists and our sponsors. Next on our agenda will be app speed dating. So finding your perfect match. Thanks everyone for joining.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.